Can we make fantasy basketball more accessible in a way that brings in new players and allows them to understand the strategy involved in fantasy basketball in a way that maybe more closely parallels the other fantasy games out there, fantasy football in particular being sort of the extreme juggernaut? Or is that the wrong way to go about doing it? These are the questions we will answer today with my good buddy, a fellow I've worked with for a very long time, or had worked with, I guess I should say, for a very long time, and now work with for 25 minutes today, my buddy Keith Cork, coming up on the show in about 2 to 3 minutes. Before we get to Keith, a quick hello. Hello. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I keep wanting to say fantasy basketball with Old Man Squad. That's not right. Many of you know I did a show called Fantasy NBA Today for a very long time, and my brain keeps wanting to mush the two show names together. Welcome to OMS Fantasy Basketball, the founding show on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. I am your host, Dan Bespris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris, and you can find Old Man Squad on Twitter at Old Man Squad. This is not an old man club. All are welcome on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. It is named after, of course, the way that I like to play fantasy basketball. But actually, this is an interesting little 2-day spurt we're going to have here, because we're talking to Jacob Dunn tomorrow, who is a bit of a points league maven. Is that actually the answer to the question today? I truly don't know. We're not going to get to an actual final result on today's podcast, but it's a discussion worth having because fantasy basketball needs to continue to grow. And in a time when people are getting fed up with head-to-head leagues and don't have the patience for my favorite, roto leagues, we got to find a way to get those folks involved in fantasy basketball and make it easy. If you are taking in this show live, whether that's YouTube or Twitter, most of you on social, please, and I'll ask us again at the show, find some other way to take in the podcast as well, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is, anywhere podcasts can be found. Those places do way more for the continued growth of the Old Man Squad Sports Network than does Twitter. I'm going to continue to do as many of these live on Twitter as I can because I think it's a nice way to remind you all of the other places you can take in the show. But please just do me that small favor and go subscribe somewhere else as well. If you left a rating or review on my old podcast, please do it on the new one. And I obviously would hope that that's a 5-star review as well. There has been basically no news in the NBA over the last 24 hours. Kristaps Porzingis sounds like he's going to try to give it a go in the first game of the finals, but we're still a couple days out from that, so we shall see. Otherwise, I was just sort of sitting and thinking this morning because my younger kid is off preschool this week, but we do have a babysitter this morning. That's how I'm able to do this as a live video show, in addition to, of course, the traditional pod channels. And I got to thinking about Paul George and what the future might mean for him, because he was right on the turn this year. In terms of fantasy value, it seemed to bump back up again, but it's not a guarantee that he's back with the Clippers. And I started to think about what that would mean for the Clippers, because this is a free agency situation. It's not like they move him and get a bunch of guys back. What does that mean for someone like a James Harden, for Kawhi? If Kawhi can be upright again next year, what does it mean for a team where Paul George goes? Like, what if he ends up in Philly? That feels like a pretty damn good landing spot. If they had Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George all healthy for the playoffs at the same time, that's a powerhouse of a team. That's a hell of a core. I don't know. I just started thinking about what his possible move could mean for fantasy values. And then, we talked yesterday. We talked yesterday. I can figure this out about like what's a way that Tyrese Maxey might not be one of these top fantasy plays next year, and that's probably the answer because he took 20 shots a game and Embiid took 22 when he was healthy. And someone would have to take a little bit of a back seat. And I don't think Paul George is going to come in and take 12 shots a game. Someone's going to take a hit there if they got together. But we don't have to get ahead of things. I was just sort of sitting and mulling it over because my brain had time to process thought. Good or bad, I don't know. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Let's talk to my old pal, Keith Cork. Here we go. I've been saying on this show that there's a bunch of guests that I haven't talked to in like 2 years. This is finally one that I have spoken to in the last 2 years. My good buddy, Keith Cork at Ethos Keith. He's over at Sports Ethos. Gee, where have I heard that site name before? It feels weirdly familiar, I think. You are now running DFS, wagering, all that good stuff. The basically what I'm referring to fondly as things happening daily. What's kicking, man? How's life?
It's pretty good, man. It's good to catch up here. Been, a month or two probably since we last spoke. So, life is definitely different from the last time we spoke since I kind of stepped back a little bit from Sports Ethos. But yeah, it's interesting. And, we're looking at this daily stuff here. Actually getting geared up at this point for football, for NFL, because getting pretty excited about that. Actually, the first time I played fantasy football in like 10 years was last season. It was probably about 8 years. And
well, great though.
I know. And I won 2 out of the 3 leagues I played. Well, I got first and second in 2 out of 3 leagues. And the third league that I didn't win was like a 30-team dynasty, auction draft. Like, I don't know why I hopped into that after not playing for 8 years, but I did. And I didn't win that one, unfortunately. But
that would have been quite something.
That would have been if I just like hop off the bench and win that right away. So yeah, I'm really shifting gears to NFL, but obviously with the NBA playoffs going on, trying to watch as much as I can. If you're not aware out there listening, I'm currently working nights, so catching games sometimes is difficult, but I do try to watch replays and things like that. So, but yeah, it's been a wild ride this season. It was a successful NBA season. Looking for a successful NFL season coming up here. So, just like you said, daily stuff. DFS and DraftKings and Underdog and all that good stuff. Player props. Been up and down recently, but looking to hit the big one still, so I can retire.
Yeah, well, aren't we all?
Yeah.
How's life? You've had. You hinted at it a little bit. You've had some changes lately.
Yeah. So I'm doing this job here, and I'm looking to eventually parlay this into a better position. But yeah, working overnights, and that's been the struggle, is trying to like sleep during the day with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Impossible.
Yeah, it's pretty much impossible. I actually have noise canceling headphones, and I have a Sirius XM subscription, so I listen to the Rainfall Network with my noise canceling headphones on to try to get like 5 hours of sleep during the day. So,
Oof.
That's always fun. No, otherwise, it's a job, and we're working through it, and I stay connected to the fantasy world and the sports world, which is where my passion lies, obviously. So,
yeah,
that gets me through the day.
Well, I do want to take a minute here before we dive into the fantasy basketball side, just to shout you out for all the stuff you accomplished with Sports Ethos. You're still there, obviously, just not doing quite as much. You ran the entirety of the Ethos content for the last, basically, I could call it the fantasy season, which was like starts with football, rolls through basketball, and then baseball was about to get going, is around when you step back to do a little bit less. But congratulations on all of that, on having a successful football season, successful basketball season. It was, from my standpoint, personally, it was always amazing to work with you there as well. And so continued success to you, my good friend.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, sure. It's it was a dream of mine to really do something like that. And even though it wasn't, a super long time that I was able to do it, I felt very, very happy, very content with the ability to kind of put together my passions and my skills, which is, working with people and getting people to that next level and helping to develop people and their skills. And I got to meet so many fantastic people while I was at Sports Ethos, and just kind of chat with them every day about, the things that we love, the things that we're passionate about. People are always at their best when they get to just kind of wax poetically about, hoops. We're all hoopers at heart. So, it was a fantastic time. I met so many good people, did a lot of great things. I was really, really proud of.
Still doing, by the way, still
Yeah.
doing.
Oh, sure. I'm still am, but not working on the draft guides anymore, which is kind of a blessing. But either way, it's we got a lot accomplished, and like you said, I think I'm proud of it either.
And you should,
even though I stood back. So.
And you should be, as someone who worked closely with Keith during my time at Sports Ethos. You made that place, and you continue to, I should say, make that place a whole hell of a lot better than before you arrived. Let's talk fantasy basketball, though. Even I know it's not fresh in everybody's minds, but we've covered all these wild topics over the last couple of weeks with the guests coming on this show, and it's been so fun for me. And I said this on yesterday's pod as well, which for two reasons. Number one, I don't have to prep as much for a show when my guest is bringing fun content topic ideas. But number two, a lot of the times it's stuff that just isn't occurring to me. And then it's out there, and you can sort of chisel at it and figure out, sort of roll around the idea and see where it lands. So again, talking to Keith Cork of Sports Ethos, what was something either this year, last couple of years, changing landscape, whatever it happens to be, that's been kind of on your mind on the fantasy basketball side? And let's see if we can pull it apart a little bit.
Well, I think, for me, something I really focused on this season, this NBA season, was I just want to talk about a league that I'm in that I think is really exciting and a really fun format. It was actually started by Stan Son of Rasball. I was with Rasball, gosh, at this point, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 even. But I was that's where I met the guys, and just kind of get invited to this league. And this is the third year now, I believe, third season of this league. It's the end of the third season because we're going to start renegotiating our contracts now with our players, renegotiating, re-signing them. But I just kind of want to talk about this because I actually won this league. It's a 30-team dynasty league. You know me, I like to play deep. I like to get deep in the weeds and go for the guy that's ranked 400th. That really gets me excited, gets me going. So I love these guys on the margins. They're just they're fantastic to talk about. But I won the league, and the way I did that was just basically producing raw stats and just getting guys that absolutely got minutes. That really helped me a whole lot. But just kind of explain what this league's about. It was an auction draft. And during this auction draft, we basically gave these players their salary for the next 3 years. Okay. So this is the end of year 3 now. Now we get to assign them for 2 to 5 seasons if we want to. If we don't want to, then they go back to the free agent pool. But it's a head-to-head league, but it's also got a roto component. So there's a cash prize. There's a cash prize for best in-season record, which I didn't win, obviously. There's a prize for the winner of the tournament, which I won, and there's a prize for the roto aspect of it. But I just thought, it was really interesting to me to basically go from like a middling team, like 10th place, 11th place, I think I was at the end of regular season, to go on and win this just by basically moneyballing this thing and making trades for guys that are, again, just getting minutes and just producing raw stats. Like, my team is headlined by De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, Nikola Vucevic, and DeMar DeRozan. So, and Michael Porter Jr. So, that's a really solid, in a 30-teamer, that's a really solid core there. But I rounded out with guys like, Vince Williams Jr. in Memphis, Trent Forrest in Atlanta was getting minutes at point guard behind Trae Young. I had, Austin Reeves, of course, Corey Kispert out there. Corey Kispert had a fantastic end of the season and stretch run there. So, Terrence Mann is on my team as well. So, just basically getting guys that are able to produce these raw stats, even though my efficiency was not so great. And that's how I basically moneyballed the situation. So I thought it was an interesting format.
How does the financial side of it work? Like, how do you sign a player in this?
So yeah, it's a $200 budget overall, and their price was just set at the auction basically, and what that held true through the 3 years. So we've got guys sitting on the waiver wire like I believe DeJounte Murray sitting out there at like $51. It's not that like DeJounte Murray's a bad player, obviously he's a great player, but that what people didn't consider when we did the draft, which is fun. It's always fun for these like really quirky things, but what people didn't consider was the per dollar impact of a player. And at the end of the day, you know, sometimes having that $51 in your, budget is more beneficial to you than having a $51 player. For me, my top player is Devin Booker. He's at $50. That's about where, people were maxing out players. That's like kind of a max salary there. I think it makes sense for Devin Booker. I mean, he's still just 27 and has, some good years in front of him. He had a great season this season with obviously the ability to play point guard, but the Suns not really having a point guard. But I know Nikola Jokic was like $110 or something like that. Like someone paid ridiculous, but like that just doesn't work. He's 96. I'm sorry, $96. That just doesn't work in this kind of format because you put all of your eggs in that one basket, and he's gonna obviously do well, but you just have nothing left to fill out your roster with guys that are going to get minutes. So that's something that people struggle with, is learning to kind of manage that auction aspect and then the salary cap aspect of it, because we can't go over the 200 at any point. And when you cut a player, you only get back half of their salary if it's in season. If you cut them early enough in the season, you get back their full salary the following season. So, but yeah, it's a very interesting format, I think, and I think the salary cap aspect of it is the hardest to manage. Like right now, I'm looking at the players that are available out there. You got DeJounte Murray at 55, Klay Thompson at 24, Rudy Gobert at 45. Like these guys are just sitting out there because nobody has the space that's actually a competitive team to go sign them.
Is there anything you could take from a wacky league like this that you think could be applied to a more standard league? Like take one element of it?
Well, I think, you can equate obviously the salary of an individual player to their draft capital. So, I think when you're talking about like, Victor Wembanyama's, I know you've talked about this with other people, but he's probably going to break the game at some point.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. This kid's absolute potential to produce quadruple doubles. I mean, it's just insane. But in the meantime, we've got Nikola Jokic, who basically broke the game also. For a few
previous
seasons.
iteration of breaking the game.
Yeah, he basically did that. So when you're talking about these salaries, someone spending $96 on Nikola Jokic does sound ridiculous. In theory, though, it can work because of how much additional value he's producing over the number 2 player in fantasy. Now that didn't come to fruition last season. I don't believe the season before that. So. I think Nikola Jokic wasn't even the top player in fantasy this past season. So, that's kind of where I would kind of equate it, is like, in auction, it's a lot of fun because you can, basically call your shots. You basically call your draft position, because whatever you pay a guy, that's kind of where they are in the grand scheme of a snake draft. So that's kind of what I took away from this, I guess, is like, don't sell the guys later in drafts short. Like, it's okay to miss a little bit on your first, couple picks. I mean, you want to pick a safe guy and not have a guy that's, not going to produce for you. But at the end of your drafts, that's kind of where leagues are won. So that's why I like to focus on the guys on the periphery, the guys that are in the 200, 300 range. That's like really kind of my bread and butter, where I've been focusing a lot of my efforts the last couple seasons.
All right, I got a good follow-up for that. Sell me on doing more auctions instead of snake draft, because I feel like that's where this conversation is headed. And I like to do a lot of quick snake drafts leading up to the season. And I know that that's not really possible. You can't just like jam in a quick auction draft in the middle of your day quite that same way. So sell me on it some other way.
Yeah, it does. It is time intensive. Obviously, there can be some specific rules or crazy rules. I think that's when it comes to like game theory, and what I enjoy about games and this game in general is like, where can I create an edge? And so that actually excites me. So like, I don't mind. I'm more inclined to pay a higher entry fee for fewer leagues, if that makes sense. For me, it's not that I'm trying to make money year over year on this. I mean, I end up doing that anyway, but I'm not trying to do that. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just kind of scratch that itch of bettering somebody in a game, which ultimately that's what really draws me to fantasy hoops. And for me, starting out, I think the edge I always thought I had was, I know hoops, and I know what these teams are going to do, what these players are going to do, and I know a player that's actually talented versus a player that just kind of had a production spike because of opportunity or something like that. And as I've gotten older and played this game more, variance exists, injuries exist, crazy things happen every single season. So like I lean less on that and more on like, where can I, in the grand scheme of things, I would say zig when they zag, of course, that's a pretty common thing, but like, where can I go and get my edge because other people aren't seeing things quite as clearly. So when it comes to auction, long story short, to kind of simplify that process, you get your cadre of guys and you lay out your budget beforehand, and what you want to spend for your max player. Maybe you give yourself $1 or $2 wiggle room or something like that. It depends on what you're playing. I mean, whatever your salary is. But you want to stick to that as much as possible. So just have a plan, and if you have a plan for one auction draft, you have a plan for every auction draft, because the ranks of the players is going to change. Like it's like 8-cat versus 9-cat, things like that. Obviously, there's a little bit of a shift, but for the most part, where the value guys are, quote unquote. And where the top guys are that you want to spend, because people aren't necessarily spending as much on them. So it's just like, when you do mock drafts, as soon as Yahoo opens up, and obviously those are crap usually because no one really gives a crap about them. But but as you get closer to the but as you get closer to the season and you do more of those things, you get more of them under your belt. You understand a little bit more about where people value guys, and that's where you can find your edge. It's like, okay, so everyone's overvaluing this guy, or everyone's looking over this guy. So.
Talking to Keith Cork, Ethos Keith on Twitter. He is, of course, of Sports Ethos. And you mentioned zigging when others zag. I always thought that was something that we all did a really nice job of at Sports Ethos. If anything, if I were to try to like pare down the thing that I learned the most of during my time there, it was about kind of seeing the marketplace for fantasy and understanding where you could zig when others zagged. And I know that that's a website that's going to continue to do a whole bunch of that. So shout out to zigging when they zag. From a settings standpoint, I want to follow up on that a little bit. As long as we're kind of in that world right now, I talked to Josh about this a couple weeks ago, and actually before this season, I know he started the this it's a light move right now, but I'm hoping it becomes a little bit heavier towards games cap on the roto side. Are there any settings you feel that need to be instituted in fantasy basketball? Because, I mean, one of the big discussions right now is how to save head-to-head leagues. And I know you've got some thoughts on that as well. So what do you think from that standpoint? How do we tweak fantasy basketball for the more average player who's not about to dive into a salary cap 30-team dynasty league?
Why not?
Or me, like not your average Joe, guy who does a ton of fantasy and is just like, you know what, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, no, it's not for everybody. It's definitely a niche thing, but no, I think the games cap, obviously that does make a lot of sense. I know I've been following your guys' conversation on that, so I tend to agree with Josh there. But for me, another thing that kind of it's funny because like playing fantasy football for the first time in 8 years really kind of opened my eyes to how simple that game is compared to how complicated fantasy hoops is. So
no one can yell at me. You're playing both, and you said it. So
it's way simpler. Obviously there's less time involved. It's only usually one day a week. You have Monday and Thursday, but typically it's just mostly Sunday. That's another 90% of your work is, or your whatever you want to pay attention to.
Right.
So, and obviously, you have, I wouldn't say, I don't think there's fewer roster spots in football, but it's just more straightforward because there's actually clear different positions in football. So that's one thing that basketball does struggle with is, every position is so fluid in hoops these days that, the position eligibility, I mean, you should just do away with that. I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's just being at all flex spots. I mean, who cares? At the end of the day, if someone wants to load up on all guards, they're going to get certain categories. Well, if someone wants to load up on all bigs, they'll get the other categories. So, why are we making this more complicated than it has to be? Where this guy's has to be a point guard or a small forward, and that always ticks me off so much. Is when I'm trying to like make my lineup and I'm like, I can't fit this last guy in because he's a small forward and not a shooting guard.
You're relying on a website that is like sometimes like maybe 5 to 10 games behind reality, and they're deciding what position this guy's actually playing based mostly on where they start the game, but it might even not necessarily be the position they play the most minutes at. I created kind of like, well, because we've done a Roto League together. I created that kind of in-between model where it's just 3 guard, 3 forward, 2 center, 2 flex, which is like, I'm okay with that. I get it. You could pivot harder like you're talking about and just go 10 flex. Yeah. I don't mind having a little bit of eligibility where it's like, oh, you want to find some assists from your forward spot. All right, find a forward that's good at assists.
Yeah,
I don't need him to be a power forward or a small forward. Just an F. That's all. That is easy to find. That's like half the freaking league right now has an F next to their name on Yahoo. That shouldn't be troubling. And now with the number of like stretch everythings, centers are suddenly much more available everywhere. But no, you know me, I'm inclined to agree with you on that one. I would love to play devil's advocate and like, oh, you need to be able to find a point guard, but like, what's a point guard anymore? You just said it. Phoenix doesn't have one. Their whole freaking team was a point guard at some point this year. So who gets the PG tag on that one? Mostly Booker, I guess, but like, I mean,
look at my favorite team, the Bulls. It's like, who brings the ball up the court? I mean, it's either when Zach LaVine was healthy, it's Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, but Kobe White's technically the point guard, I guess. Yeah,
Kobe, Io, DeMar, LaVine.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous because basketball just doesn't play out that way anymore. So we need to let go of that. And then the other thing that I found is helpful because I run a casual league. I've been running my home league for 14, 15 seasons now. We've turned it into a keeper league now, but for the most part, it's still pretty casual. And there's definitely different levels of skill. And I'm like never disparaging anybody. There's people that are new to the game. I'm always happy to welcome them in. I've got 12 spots, and someone usually leaves, and there's usually a spot or 2 open every season. So, I try to keep things casual. One thing I find that helps is, really limiting the moves that you can make per week. Because if you're sitting there giving people, 10, 15 moves in a week, they're just maxing games. And first of all, that's not fun for anybody because you're just maxing game, you're maxing games, and that's great. I'm glad that you can read a schedule and plan that, but that's not really what the spirit of the game is supposed to be about, right? So it's not really something that I enjoy doing, even as somebody that's really into this. So why would a casual person be into that? And fewer moves obviously means you have to pay less attention because you can just set your lineup every week and be done with it, and hands free, and I'm done. Move on with my life, and most people just want to do that. And that's why football, ultimately is the way more popular fantasy format, because you can just do that. You don't have to move any moves if you don't want to, as long as there's no injuries. You'll be totally fine. So, simplifying the game, I think really, and to reach more casual fans is really the way to go. There's still plenty of options out there for people like me that want to go and get absolutely complicated and stupid batshit crazy about things.
Yep. Well, you found it, man. That league that's wild. There's like no amount of, well, that's not true. If somebody paid me to play in that league, I would play in it. But you couldn't. No, my time is so limited. I'm already shaving leagues on it. How many leagues do you think? Here's a good one. Last question for you on the league stuff, and then we'll let you get back to your morning now. Yes. Which I know nobody doesn't matter because I'm airing this show whenever. But Keith and I are taping, by the way, at 3:30 in the afternoon Pacific time. You're on Central time. Mm-hmm. By the way, I only have Bulls fans on the podcast now. I don't know how that happened, but there's just like a run of you guys on the show.
We're all depressed, so you get the depressed people out here.
Trying to cheer you all up, and I don't think I can do it until you somehow bring a first rounder back in a trade. How many leagues do you have to shave, you think, to be able to focus on the 30-team salary cap league that you're in? Like, how many 12-team redraft Yahoo public leagues could you do with the same amount of time that you
Yeah.
spend on that 30-teamer.
Oh man, I could probably
3 or
do
4?
yeah, I could probably do 3 or 4. That's pretty accurate, I think. I think, yeah, that's the amount because the thing that takes the most time obviously is the trading, right? And people that are in that kind of league, they're so insane. They understand well, you think they would understand the value of folks, but obviously I found the people that didn't. So, and I traded with them.
Mhm.
So, and now they're
There
out
you
of the
go.
league. They left the league. So,
Oh, you fleeced them into total obscurity,
look,
right out of the
most
league.
of the time I offer fair trades, Dan. I do not try to pull the wool. I know people have different strategies for trading, and some people like to just like shoot the most crazy crap over and be
Oh,
like,
it's
okay,
terrible.
maybe they'll
I hate
hit
that.
accept on accident or something like that. And I'm not that person. I try to go, okay, this seems fair to me. Let's send that over. So the ones I accepted pretty much immediately, and I don't think about them. Just if you're in a league with me and I do that, understand you probably sent a really crappy trade over for yourself. And I just took it because why would I not take free stuff that's sitting right in front of me? So
Yeah, and you're awake in the middle of the night right now,
yeah,
so and you're all over the waiver. Nobody's gonna stop you these days. You got the
uh,
I'm awake at midnight
I'm ready.
advantage now. Oh boy. Oh boy, you're gonna be a tough nut. We are by the way, actually before we get into wrap up, what you got going on? Let's do some promo. What's the haps these days for Ethos Keith?
Yeah, man, I am definitely still hitting up all those the wagering in the DFS as as you said. I'm really right now focusing on underdog best ball drafts. So if you see me on Twitter, see it on the screen there or at Ethos Keith. Follow me there. I'm posting every single lineup that I draft this season just to see if people have any thoughts about it. But I've got some really exciting I think insights about things that are going to happen in the NFL. It's pretty unpredictable because obviously there's injury like every week in the NFL. So, maybe I'll be right, maybe I won't, but I think there's some exciting stuff going on there. So yeah, follow along and let's draft some best ball teams. Let's do some pick'ems. Love those pick'ems too. And still rocking the DraftKings DFS, but kind of slower these days with no NBA going on. Kind of waiting for the NFL regular season start. If you're playing DFS in the preseason, just don't go invest your money in something else because it's not worth your
You
time.
mean you're not enjoying the 10 days in between basketball games happening right now? I mean,
I'm going
brutal.
crazy.
Absolutely brutal. I know they have to do it because the finals have to start and end at the
Mhm.
right time and everything's got to fit. But damn, if the conference finals go quickly, that really ends up blowing. You can find your wagering stuff. That's at Ethos Wagering still, right? That hasn't changed.
That's the same.
The other ones, the blurb
Wagering.
feeds did. The blurb
Yeah.
feeds did. I know
Yep.
that was happening right around my departures, but
Mhm.
Ethos Wagering.
Mhm.
Trying to get my words right here. Ethos Keith. He is Keith Cork, my good buddy, a man who I shared a Slack channel with for many moons at Sports Ethos. Keith, thank you so much for coming on, and God help your poor Chicago Bulls.
Thanks for having me, and go Bulls.
That was Keith Cork, my old buddy Keith Cork, kicking it over there at Ethos Wagering. Welcome back, everybody. I'm having a frickin' wingding here. I don't know. Is it obvious? Is it obvious that I'm having a grand old time? We've had 8, I think 8, no, 9. Now it's 9 guests in the last 10 episodes of this show. At some point, I'm just going to have a solo one where I shout into the void, but not yet. And actually, not probably for the next, is it going to be 1 or 2 shows? It might be the rest of this damn week. Jacob Dunn, coming up tomorrow, he's going to talk to us about why points leagues should not get clowned on the way that we, well, frankly, kind of clown on them. Noah Rubin of Roto World, that's coming up on Thursday's show. I'm going to figure this out. And then Friday, I'm hoping, and he just had a kid, Adam Stock, the punt master himself, should be coming on the program on Friday. So I think we're going to have guests every single day this week. And then next week, I'm hoping that I can now, I guess say I hope, I think, I guess I'm in control of it. We should be able to finish up the Old Man Squad review. We'll kind of cycle back through a couple of guests again. I got a couple more in the tank here that I want to make sure we get on the podcast as well. Guys that been wanting to get on for a little bit. But we got the Old Man review. We've got the draft, the actual NBA draft that's coming up real soon, 2 weeks basically. And we're going to want to talk to some folks to find out who the rookies are that we should be keeping an eye on the fantasy side. So that will also be coming up. We'll probably start getting into that maybe end of next week. I don't do a ton of draft shows because you guys know that's not really my area of expertise. We'll have a few experts on to talk about the young players, just the way we've done the last couple of seasons. And they'll give us frankly, I'm looking for big men that could end up in a good landing spot and won't destroy either of my percentages. Now, for a big man, typically the one you're worried about is free throw, but you never really know. So, yeah, that'll be coming up in the not too distant future as well. This is an interesting spot I'm in here where I've never had an off season where I had more shows than dates. I'm not going to start doing shows on the weekend right now. We'll do that when we get into sort of August, September range. We'll start cranking out a bunch of shows and just going basically constantly because there's 1,000 things you want to try to do leading up to the draft. We'll have a lot of mock drafts with industry folks, with folks from Twitter, with folks from YouTube, with folks who listen to the show on all the different platforms. So stay tuned for that. That'll be more towards August, though, so we still have a little bit of time there. Free agency is less than a month away now. There's a lot of things to cover, and frankly, not enough time to do them. I will, however, now ask at the end of the show, once again, if you are taking in this podcast on Twitter, I'm speaking directly to you. Please go subscribe somewhere else. All of the links are in my pinned tweet on my profile, which I know you can find because you're watching the show on Twitter. So that should be really easy for you to just click over to my page and see it. You got iTunes, you got Spotify, you got iHeartRadio, you got YouTube. You got all kinds of stuff there that you can choose for subscribing to the show because those are the spots that actually sort of further the cause of the Old Man Squad Sports Network. If you are a longtime listener and you've migrated over here to the new show, please do take a moment to drop a 5-star review. I see some 30 odd of you have done it on Spotify and 30 odd of you have done it on Apple Podcasts as well. Let's just keep that number growing because I think with the old show, we had almost 900 on Apple Podcasts, and I don't remember what the total number was on Spotify for the old feed, but would love to try to climb back towards those numbers at some point along the way. Whatever we can do to get there is much appreciated. Thank you to Ethos Keith Cork, Corky, my guest today. Again, 3 more guests the rest of the week. We'll go all 5 days this week, and when that's done, I believe that'll be, what did we do? 1, 2, 3, and then we had 3 for 3 starting on Wednesday, May 22nd. Wednesday, May 22nd is when it started. We did Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with a guest that week. We did 4 out of 5 the following week, and we'll be at 5 out of 5 this week. So 3, 4, 5 with only 1 day off. That's, I think, 12. Yeah, 12 out of 13 shows. That's what I want, baby. That's a good ratio. I'm Dan Vespris for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Follow at Old Man Squad on Twitter as well, and I will see you guys over there in between pods. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.